Hello and welcome to In the Hyperloop. My name is Blake and um, just making sure that the video is working. And yes, we're live. So wanted to say a quick video and shout out. I just participated in the Hard Tech Funds conference, Hyperloop Symposium. There were international teams from Europe, Africa, and India and Asia, and also here in the United States. It was a really fascinating event, and I learned a tremendous amount. What you can do is you can already watch the coverage on Facebook, it's on Hard Tech Fund's Facebook feed, and it was just really fun to learn more about um, all of the different research that is going in and um, you know, learning about all the participation and the hard work. Tomorrow is the second day in the conference. You can still register for the conference, and the schedule for tomorrow is a panel discussion on all of the research papers that had happened today, and there will be a number of stakeholder organizations, including AECOM, MIG, and Virgin Hyperloop One, that will be also watching and giving feedback on all of these research presentations. And we did a brief, live tweet of the event today. So in case you need the TLDR explanation of what happened, definitely check out all of the live tweets that we did. And it was just a really fun time. I also wanted to give a shout out to Strathloop, who is making their research on eddy currents and the propulsion live. Really fascinating to learn about that. And the next thing I wanted to go into is the different news reports of the United States Department of Transportation's uh, a press release, an announcement from the Non-Traditional and Emerging Transportation Technology Council, unveiling guidance back in July on frameworks for Hyperloop in the United States. And this is the Virgin Hyperloop One's press release on bridging the gap between innovation and regulator and prioritizing safety and development without hampering innovation. So I would highly recommend you check out this press release. And of course, many Hyperloop companies have been working closely with the NETT Council, including Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, to quickly and safely deploy Hyperloop. And I just wanted to really highlight this article by Transpod on how to ensure Hyperloop will have a regulatory framework when ready for the first passengers. The entire Hyperloop industry, welcomed efforts in the United States and the EU for moving the development forward for Hyperloop systems. And there outlines a couple steps for the creation of Hyperloop regulation councils. So number one is, why is it important to work on the regulations now? Well, like it or not, the technology is a part of our lives. And until the regulatory framework is in place to ensure safe and secure usage of the technology, and not having these regulations in place because the technology is not quite there yet. So it's really interesting. Hyperloop's a mix of trains, subways, maglevs, planes. It's not completely new or unnew. There's many governments that are showing their support, and they anticipate that Hyperloop will be implemented in the next decade. Let's not repeat the errors of the past and have a transportation system built but can't be operated because regulations came too late. And Hyperloop systems are being designed as you read this article, and if you attended the Hyperloop Symposium today, you literally see the research that is going into um, braking, and these are all mainly SpaceX Hyperloop pod competition teams that presented. Um, but just the amount of physics and research that it takes to make sure that the levitation works correctly, and publishing that research, making sure it's peer reviewed. Um, it's quite a lot. So as we go back into the post, how a European partnership got the European Union to start working on Hyperloop regulations. In June 2018, a partnership was formed between 4 European companies: Transpod, in Canada and France, Zeleros in Spain, Hyperloop in the Netherlands, Hyper Poland in Poland. And the partnership collaborated on a common roadmap to establish international standards and regulatory framework with the Transportation Department of the European Union. Following the initiative, the EU created this year a joint technical committee dedicated to Hyperloop system standards. And finally, as part of this tourist and recovery plan in the EU after COVID, Hyperloop connections between major cities in Europe was found to be affordable, clean, fast alternative to short-haul air traffic. So how did the US start to work on their own regulations? Well, the Non-Traditional and Emerging Transportation Technology Council was formed in the United States in March 2019 by the US Department of, US Transportation Secretary Elaine Chu. Its mission was to identify and resolve jurisdictional and regulatory gaps that may impede the deployment of new technologies such as tunneling, Hyperloop autonomous vehicles, and other innovations. And it's really interesting that they really include tunneling and Hyperloop together. We're going to do a video soon on just what it takes to do tunneling right now, the cost of it, and if you haven't already heard about it, the Boring Revolution on YouTube does great videos on the Boring Company and their work right now. And going back to this article, July 2020, the Moving Forward Act passed the U.S. House of Representatives and other provisions regarding new modes of transportation, and it asked the NETT Council to issue guidance to provide a clear framework for the deployment of Hyperloop. And then last month, or 2 months ago, the NETT Council published Pathways for Future Transportation to explain the mission of the council. The document highlighted that Hyperloop regulations will fall under the Federal Railway Association, the FRA, which makes Hyperloop projects eligible for grants and federal financial assistance, and introduces next steps like a congressionally approved $2 million study on new and emerging cross-modal transportation technologies, including Hyperloop. So who's more than welcome to join the Transpod efforts? Well, they're great news for the entire Hyperloop industry. Some key stakeholders are not involved yet. Each European country involved in the JTC20 will conduct more work and then share the results at the European level. In France, for example, Transpod is taking a look at leadership roles for the Hyperloop Standardization Committee under the aegis of the national standard body AFNOR. But it's quite unfortunate that the French Ministry of Transport is not taking part in these discussions, as Transpod is wanting to build their test track in France first. So yeah, they're working through Canada as well because they're also based in Canada, and it's only a matter of time. Hopefully that Canada gets around to this. So governments who are partnered in feasibility studies, key players in the transportation industry, either manufacturers or contractors, and financial institutions are welcome to join the working group and take part in drafting standards that will create a regulatory framework for future transportation. So what's next? If you remember, well, in the first paragraph, drafting a regulatory framework doesn't make sense if there's no piece of technology to work on. And this is what all these university groups are actually working hard right now on, actually doing the, the hard work of creating the regulatory, research. And today we heard from Hyperloop IITB in India, One Loop in California, HyperExcite in California, Helwan Hyperloop in Egypt, Cooper Union in New York City, and all these different research, propulsion control systems, power management, batteries, braking structures and safety. Um, all of those different researchers that are working on this um, are still, trying to get Hyperloop companies to build test tracks globally to conduct their own tests, but also allow regulators to see and appreciate the whole system, um, ultimately to pave the way for strong, safe, and secure standards and regulations. So a scheme that was first in place was the first phase in most advanced commercial projects like in India, which is currently on hold, is to build a test track of 11 kilometers to be used to establish certification. Um, and also the SpaceX pod competition theoretically next year will be a 10-kilometer track, maybe in, Las Vegas, who knows, using Boring Company stuff. But there's still a lot of work to be done. Hyperloop systems are getting closer to reality. The interest from the public and private institutions is growing. Feasibility studies are conducted globally in the US, Europe, Thailand, which Transpod did, and test tracks are springing up. Now the regulators are on board. We're eager and welcome you to this global Hyperloop movement. So um, reach out to Terry on LinkedIn. Of course, he's working with and for Transpod, but this was just kind of a good opening article to then appreciate the press releases made by Virgin Hyperloop One. And also it entered the media, um, with tunneling and Hyperloop. This article was published back in April, but it really does a great article on learning about how Hyperloop will rely on tunnels and what is the current state of cheaply building tunnels. And of course, the Boring Company is now having a boring competition for tunneling, and I'm sure a lot of Hyperloop teams are also looking into that as well. Um, but this was just a really good overview of why tunnels and Hyperloop are go hand in hand, because you do need those long straight shots to go really fast. And this article by GovTech also outlines this July press release by the Department of Transportation. Proposed Hyperloop transportation can move pods and passengers with freight through low pressure tubes, more than 500 miles an hour. It created a lot of buzz, and Ryan Kelly from Virgin Hyperloop One says that this is a turning point for the industry, and bodes well for their proposed link in Pittsburgh and Chicago. It gives confidence to stakeholders that this is a priority, not a pipe dream. Um, and this article goes, about that partnership with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, which we've done an interview with, to have a Hyperloop between Pittsburgh to Chicago via Columbus in about 56 minutes at a cost of about $93. Um, how to move forward from all of these research and feasibility studies, and there's just numerous amounts of them. Um, just kind of going through this article. We're at the point where we want to get safety certified. We feel confident about our technology. Of course, they have the 500-meter test track in Las Vegas, but they haven't put anybody in it. um, and yeah, so let's get actually to the website of the Department of Transportation, transportation.gov, and the NTT Council, where this report originated from. You can read the report. I'd highly recommend you do. What I did is just kind of Control F Hyperloop, and the really what's remarkable, and what I didn't really realize until I read the report, is that the report mentions Hyperloop and tunneling over and over again. And they want to increase the new technology and tunneling technologies, but also this will augment and help Hyperloop as well. Um, if a Hyperloop system employs maglev technology, the necessary oversight authority for that system exists under the FRA's, the rail authority's jurisdiction. So boom, there you go. It's a rail. Hyperloop is a system of integration of technologies employed by multiple industries. Um, its safe integration into transportation systems should be accelerated through reuse, modification, and integration of existing technical standards from other transportation modes, and in some cases, non-transportation sectors. We're just going to kind of go through this, Control F of Hyperloop. For the proposed purpose of this document, Hyperloop is considered with a pod, magnetic levitation based mode of transportation in a vacuum sealed tube or system of tubes that operates at low pressure to reduce drag, increasing efficiency and drastically reducing time. Yeah, so federal requirements for transport projects receiving federal funding. They mention Hyperloop, but also tunnel boring. Hyperloop will be may be eligible for federal financing assistance under certain departmental programs in the same way that other maglev projects may be available for such programs. Innovators are concerned that regulation may create barriers for innovation. The U.S. Department of Transportation currently has the necessary authority to regulate Hyperloop technology safely and effectively. Several commenters contended that the current regulation regime for Hyperloop projects is highly uncertain, which may discourage investment in new technologies. Commenters also note the need for regulatory flexibility to accommodate non-traditional and emerging transportation technologies, and the potential for different deterrent, to innovate caused by attempting to shoehorn a particular technology into a regulatory regime that does not fit. The FRA has the necessary authority to regulate Hyperloop systems and technologies that use maglev. We're just gonna scroll down. Projects that have engaged with the NCT Council are interested in federal funding opportunities that are available for their technologies. That's kind of the basis for all of this. Everybody wants federal funding and federal assistance to get off the ground. The U.S. Department of Transportation should consider international and private sector standards, how to regulate the technology. The NETT Council plans to research and the applicability of existing standards to Hyperloop systems in the United States. One comment stated that while the international consensus is important, the United States should not cede to other national leaderships in creating safety and effective regulatory regimes for Hyperloop technology. Several commenters provided specific recommendations for standard Hyperloop systems. Next steps. Congress approved $2 million to fund the NETT Council to get it off the ground, including Hyperloop research, and the NETT Council will begin researching existing standards to provide best practices in the US and internationally, including the standards suggested for maglev and Hyperloop. So yeah, that's about it. It's getting off the ground, and without events like the Hard Tech Fund today, and being involved in research and university groups that are building these Hyperloop pods for real world use, none of this would be possible. So feel free to register for tomorrow. Tomorrow again will be kind of the panel discussions on the research papers that had happened today. So propulsion methods, controls, battery, and track setup. It'll be really interesting to hear the discussion, and in case you missed it all today, we do have a thread in the Hyperloop that discusses what happened and, talking about carbon fiber sandwich panels, um, parallel arrays of Hallbacks, the physics and math equations for all of these different um, uh, uh, magnetic levitation. Um, it's really fascinating, and I hope you can rewatch the Hard Tech Fund's Facebook feed of all of these research. This was a really interesting. This was talking about braking from, I believe, UC Davis, and their uh, next pod, they were able to calculate the dollars per newton of braking force from $4 to $1.29. So not only are these Hyperloop groups, um, building these pods, but they're also doing so very cheaply on shoestring budgets and during COVID, so they can't even meet up in person. They have to do everything remotely and online. So just really impressive hard work done by these teams like One Loop and UC Davis, and yeah, just really fascinating. So I'd highly recommend you join Hard Tech Fund tomorrow for the live feed, and we hope everybody is staying safe and